I never thought I'd see the day when the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company would call me into his office personally. And yet, there I was, heart pounding, palms sweating, trying not to look like the mess I felt inside. My name is Emily Carter, and I work at Hallberg Tech in New York. Most people see me as a quiet, diligent employee who keeps her head down and gets the work done. But beneath that calm exterior, I have a fire that only ignites when someone tries to destroy my reputation. And that's exactly what had happened. It all started 6 months ago when I was promoted to lead analyst on one of our most critical projects. I had poured my heart and soul into that role. Nights blurred into mornings as I combed through endless datasets, built predictive models, and prepared presentations that I thought even our CEO would appreciate. For the first 3 months, everything went smoothly. My team respected me, and upper management praised our progress. But then, things changed. My manager, Jacob Reynolds, started acting differently. At first, it was subtle, passing snide comments in meetings, questioning my decisions unnecessarily, and occasionally forgetting to include me in important email threads. I shrugged it off at first, thinking maybe I was imagining things. But soon, the subtlety turned into a pattern. One Monday morning, I logged into our internal dashboard and froze. My performance metrics had dropped overnight. Not by a little, I'm talking plummeted, the kind of drop that could make HR raise an eyebrow. My project KPIs were shown as incomplete, deadlines missed, even though I had personally completed and submitted every single report on time. Confused and panicked, I went to Jacob. "Jacob, there must be a mistake," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the adrenaline rushing through me. He looked at me, smiling that thin, practiced smile, and said, "Emily, I don't know what to tell you. Your metrics are clear. Maybe you're just not meeting expectations anymore." I felt my stomach twist. Not only was he lying, he was doing it in a way that seemed credible. He knew the system inside and out. The performance dashboard pulled from multiple sources, all logged and time-stamped. Anyone who didn't know the details would assume the numbers were accurate. I tried to fight back. I pulled screenshots, timestamps, email confirmations, and even system logs showing that all my tasks were submitted on time and completed properly. But Jacob kept smirking, dismissing me in meetings, and subtly undermining my credibility. Rumors began to swirl. My colleagues hesitated to involve me in projects, and even my team started questioning my judgment. Every day became a battle to maintain my sanity while pretending everything was fine. Late one night, I stayed behind in the office, sifting through our internal logs and code repositories, trying to find something, anything, that could expose Jacob. And then I saw it, a small, overlooked function in the reporting system, a variable that, if manipulated, could retroactively alter performance metrics. And guess who had access to that variable? Jacob. But he wasn't careful enough. Somewhere in the logs, he had left a trace of the manipulation. My mind raced. I realized I had two options: confront him and risk immediate retaliation, or quietly gather every piece of evidence and take it straight to the top. I chose the latter. The next week, I meticulously documented everything. I wrote a timeline of every project, every submission, every instance where Jacob had interfered. I annotated the system logs, highlighting where the metrics had been tampered with and how it clearly pointed back to him. By the time I was done, I had compiled a dossier that would make anyone in HR's position stop and take notice. But I didn't stop there. I knew going through HR could take weeks, maybe months. I needed a faster, more direct approach. So, I scheduled a meeting with the CEO's assistant under the pretense of discussing a new analytical model I had developed for our quarterly projections. In reality, I carried the evidence in a secured folder, ready to drop on the desk of the one person who could stop Jacob before he ruined my career. The morning of the meeting, my nerves were through the roof. I walked into the CEO's office, feeling like a tiny ant standing in the middle of a storm. Michael Hallberg, a man with a reputation for ruthless efficiency and unshakable judgment, looked up from his screen. His eyes, sharp and calculating, met mine. "Emily, good to see you. What's this model you've been working on?" he asked, gesturing for me to sit. I opened my folder and began presenting, carefully weaving in the data I had collected, slowly building the narrative that revealed Jacob's manipulations without immediately accusing anyone. As I spoke, I watched Hallberg's eyes narrow, his fingers drumming against the desk. He listened to every word, scanned every screenshot, and then he stopped. "Wait," he said, leaning back. "These timestamps, they don't line up with the metrics on my dashboard. Are you saying someone retroactively changed your performance data?" I swallowed hard. "Yes, sir. I believe Jacob Reynolds tampered with the system to make it appear as though I was underperforming. I have all the logs and supporting evidence here." Hallberg didn't speak for a long moment. He simply leaned forward, steepling his fingers, his gaze piercing through me as if weighing my honesty. I held my breath, feeling every second stretch into eternity. Then, finally, he said, "Emily, you've done your homework. This is impressive." The next few hours were a blur. Hallberg called IT, HR, and compliance, all while I sat quietly, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. They ran their checks, verified the logs, and within the day, Jacob was called into the CEO's office. I didn't hear what was said, but the silence that followed in the hallway was deafening. By the end of the week, the results were clear. Jacob had been placed on immediate suspension, pending further investigation. My metrics were restored, and an official note clarified my excellent performance. Colleagues who had doubted me began apologizing, though I barely acknowledged them. The victory felt hollow in a way, because the months of stress, sleepless nights, and anxiety couldn't be returned. But there was something else, a sense of vindication that made all the struggle worth it. Even now, months later, I still replay that moment in my mind, the fear of walking into the CEO's office, the dread of exposing a manager who had power over my career, and the thrill of seeing justice unfold. I had learned something important, not just about office politics, but about myself. I was stronger, smarter, and more resilient than I ever imagined. And if anyone ever tried to sabotage me again, I knew exactly how to fight back. After Jacob's suspension, life at Hallberg Tech didn't instantly return to normal. If anything, the air felt heavier. People whispered behind doors, eyes darting toward me as if I were a walking headline. Some were genuinely impressed, others clearly intimidated. I walked the halls with a calm exterior, but inside, a storm was brewing. Because I knew Jacob wasn't the only person who could sabotage me, and in a place like this, power always found ways to protect itself. The CEO, Michael Hallberg, didn't just sit back after learning the truth. That meeting with him had been only the beginning. I started receiving private emails from him, small notes of encouragement, and requests for insight on different projects. Suddenly, I wasn't just an analyst. I was an invisible advisor to the highest office in the company. And with that visibility came both opportunity and risk. I had learned something vital. Knowledge was power. The same way Jacob had tried to manipulate the system, I could now see the weak points in our structure and use them, not for revenge against him, but for self-preservation and influence. I began studying every process, every reporting line, every internal workflow. I mapped out who held real power, who made decisions quietly behind closed doors, and who was merely a figurehead. It was intoxicating, this view into the inner workings of a corporation most employees barely glimpsed. Then came the first subtle test of my new position. A senior manager, Thomas Myers, approached me under the guise of collaboration. "Emily," he said, "the CEO mentioned your insight on the analytics dashboard. I'd love to get your perspective on some restructuring we're planning." At first, it seemed innocent, but I sensed the undercurrent. Thomas had a reputation for protecting his interests, sometimes at the expense of others. I knew he would try to use me to cover his own mistakes or shift blame. I listened, nodded, and offered suggestions, but I was careful to phrase everything neutrally. I didn't commit to anything I couldn't prove later, and I logged every conversation meticulously. The weeks that followed became a game of chess. Small wins, small observations, and constant vigilance. I learned to read the subtle signals, the way a glance could betray intentions, the phrasing of a question that hinted at manipulation, and the quiet emails that carried hidden threats. My previous experience with Jacob had sharpened me. Now, I could anticipate moves before they happened, and in some cases, subtly influence outcomes without anyone realizing. Then came the incident that would cement my position. A major quarterly report was due, one that would determine bonuses, promotions, and departmental funding. Thomas had taken credit for parts of the data compilation, and the CEO was relying on him to provide accurate numbers. But I had discovered discrepancies in his submissions, small errors he assumed no one would notice. I faced a choice. I could quietly fix the errors and let Thomas take the credit, or I could expose the discrepancies in a way that highlighted my competence and integrity without making it look like personal revenge. I chose the latter. On the day of the presentation, I arrived early, setting up my laptop and printing copies of corrected charts and supporting logs. When the meeting started, Thomas began his usual confident spiel, unaware that the CEO had glanced at my notes before he began. Midway through, I asked a few clarifying questions, casually referencing the corrected figures. Michael's eyebrow arched, just a flicker, but enough. By the end of the meeting, the discrepancies were visible to everyone. Thomas tried to deflect, but the CEO had the corrected logs in front of him. The room fell silent, except for the soft click of the CEO's pen on his desk. "Emily," he said finally, "thank you for clarifying these numbers. Excellent work." Thomas's face went pale. My colleagues looked at me with a mix of admiration and fear. I realized then that my position had shifted dramatically. No longer was I just someone who had survived Jacob's manipulation. I was now someone people had to account for. I had leverage. I had visibility. I had influence. But power in the corporate world is a double-edged sword. With every step I took forward, there were new threats, subtle and hidden. Some tried to win me over with flattery, others with veiled intimidation. I learned to navigate it all with a combination of charm, caution, and careful documentation. Every email, every conversation, every presentation was a potential weapon or shield. One evening, I received a message from the CEO's office. "Michael wants to see you."
Urgent.
My heart raced. Was this another test? Another crisis? I entered his office to find him reviewing a set of proposals from the board of directors. "Emily, sit," he said. "I've been watching your progress. You handled Thomas perfectly. I want you to start taking a more active role in oversight across multiple departments. Your insights are invaluable, and frankly, I trust your judgment more than most." I nodded, careful not to show just how thrilled I was. This was more than recognition. It was a mandate to influence, to protect, and to shape decisions at the highest level. But with that came responsibility. Any mistake could be magnified, any misstep used against me. Over the next months, I immersed myself in the company's operations. I audited reports, analyzed workflows, and identified inefficiencies no one else had noticed. I built quiet alliances with people who valued transparency and competence, and subtly countered those who sought to manipulate or undermine me. Hallberg trusted me implicitly, and I used that trust wisely, never overstepping, but always ensuring that the right information reached the right hands at the right time. Through it all, I remembered Jacob. His attempt to destroy me had been the catalyst that taught me vigilance, strategy, and patience. The corporate battlefield was harsh, but I had learned to navigate it with precision. I had learned that the smallest oversight, an unlogged change, a misplaced chart, could be devastating. And I would never let that happen to me again. By the end of the year, the landscape of power at Hallberg Tech had shifted. Jacob's suspension had become permanent after further investigation, and other managers had taken note of my rise. I wasn't just surviving, I was influencing outcomes, shaping decisions, and in subtle ways, making the company more accountable. I had turned a moment of vulnerability into a position of strength, and it felt exhilarating. I often reflect on that period, the fear, the tension, the meticulous planning. It was a crucible that tested my resilience, intelligence, and patience. I had entered Hallberg Tech as a diligent analyst, quietly ambitious but cautious. I emerged as someone who could protect herself, influence others, and navigate the intricate web of corporate power. And I realized something fundamental. Revenge, when executed with precision and integrity, doesn't just settle scores, It transforms you into a force that commands respect. By the time spring rolled around, I had settled into a rhythm at Hallberg Tech that was both exhilarating and exhausting. The CEO's trust in me had grown to the point where he regularly consulted me on sensitive decisions, and my colleagues, some reluctantly, some enthusiastically, sought my input. I had become a quiet force within the company, and while I maintained a calm exterior, inside, I was always alert, scanning for threats, opportunities, and weak links. It was during one routine Friday afternoon that the situation escalated. I was reviewing quarterly projections when an urgent email pinged into my inbox from Hallberg himself. It was curt. "Emily, meet me in my office immediately. Confidential." My stomach tightened, but I knew better than to panic. In this world, urgency didn't always mean danger. It often meant opportunity. I walked into his office to find a small team of executives already gathered, their faces tense. Michael motioned for me to sit. "Emily, we've uncovered irregularities in one of our acquisitions. The numbers don't add up, and preliminary investigation points to manipulation at multiple levels," he said. A chill ran down my spine. Corporate sabotage at this level could destroy reputations, careers, and millions in revenue. But I had faced situations like this before, and I knew the first rule: information is power. "What kind of manipulation are we talking about?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. Hallberg looked at me, his eyes sharp. "Someone has been altering financial reports and redirecting funds. We suspect someone with access to internal dashboards and executive-level permissions." My mind immediately went to Jacob's old network. Even though he was gone, people often leave backdoors, intentionally or not. I requested access to the system logs and audit trails, carefully tracing transactions and comparing them with the official documentation. Hours turned into days as I combed through records, my pulse quickening with each anomaly I discovered. Then I found it, a pattern of transfers, subtle enough that most would miss them, linked back to a seemingly innocuous mid-level manager, Vanessa Cole. She had been with the company for over a decade, known for her dedication and charm. But charm can mask ruthlessness, and years in corporate politics had made her a master of it. I compiled my findings meticulously, documenting every altered report, every unauthorized transaction, and every email thread that suggested collusion. By the time I walked into the CEO's office with the complete dossier, I felt a strange mix of adrenaline and satisfaction. This wasn't just about exposing wrongdoing. It was about protecting the company and proving that meticulous diligence could outmatch manipulation. Hallberg scanned the documents, his expression unreadable. Then he leaned back and said, "Emily, this is impressive. You've connected dots no one else even noticed. Are you confident in this?" "Absolutely," I replied, voice calm but firm. "The evidence is clear. Vanessa manipulated the reports to cover her own errors and funnel funds improperly. I've also traced where she might try to shift blame if confronted." The following days were intense. Hallberg called an emergency board meeting, and I was invited to present my findings. Standing in the boardroom, I felt a strange thrill, not of arrogance, but of purpose. I laid out the evidence, carefully walking the directors through the timeline, the discrepancies, and the manipulations. Vanessa sat at the far end of the table, attempting to maintain composure, but the tension around her was palpable. By the end of the presentation, the room was silent. One director finally spoke. This is thorough. How did you uncover this?" I simply smiled faintly. Attention to detail and a commitment to integrity. When you trust the data, and the data is manipulated, it's only a matter of time before the pattern reveals itself. The CEO nodded approvingly. Vanessa's attempts to deny or deflect crumbled under the weight of clear evidence. Within hours, she was placed on administrative leave, and the board initiated a full-scale investigation. This time, there was no doubt, no ambiguity, no room for manipulation. After the storm settled, Michael called me back into his office. "Emily, you've proven yourself in ways I hadn't imagined. Your diligence, strategy, and integrity have saved the company millions and protected its reputation. You've earned a level of trust few ever achieve." I felt a rush of accomplishment, but also a quiet awareness of what this meant. Trust at this level wasn't given lightly, and it could vanish just as quickly. The corporate world had teeth, and while I had learned to navigate it, I knew vigilance was eternal. In the following months, my role expanded. I was no longer just an analyst. I became a strategic advisor, a guardian of transparency, and, in subtle ways, an enforcer of accountability. I mentored junior employees, helped restructure reporting systems to prevent future manipulation, and acted as a quiet check on the ambitions of others. My colleagues respected me, some even feared me, but most importantly, they learned to take my work seriously. I sometimes reflect on that journey, from being undermined by Jacob, humiliated by false metrics, and navigating the treacherous waters of office politics, to becoming a force that could protect both myself and the company. The lessons were clear. Knowledge is power, preparation is essential, and integrity, when paired with strategy, can overcome even the most insidious threats. The final lesson, however, was personal. Revenge, when executed with precision and patience, isn't just about punishing the wrongdoer. It's about reclaiming control over your own life, your own narrative. I had turned what could have been a career-ending betrayal into an opportunity to rise, to assert myself, and to demonstrate that competence and courage matter, even in a world dominated by manipulation and hidden agendas. Now, as I walk the halls of Hallberg Tech, I do so with a sense of quiet authority. I know that threats will always exist, that people will always try to manipulate and undermine. But I also know that I have the tools, the knowledge, and the courage to navigate it all. And in the rare moments when I pause and reflect, I realize that the journey, full of fear, tension, strategy, and triumph, has transformed me into someone I can be proud of. Because at the end of the day, surviving isn't enough. Thriving in a world full of deceit and doing it with integrity is the real victory. And I, Emily Carter, had done just that. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below to share your thoughts. And stay tuned for more thrilling revenge stories.